Hi guys, welcome to our podcast on chronic stress. I'm Riona.
And I'm Colin.
In today's episode, what will we be discussing?
We're going to be speaking mainly about psychological entrapment. Whenever you feel trapped in a stressful life situation which has become prolonged, that is a common factor in developing many mental health issues and or developing chronic diseases. So entrapment is associated with depression in people, especially with schizophrenia, even things like informal caregiving. So if you end up having to look after a relative like your mother or father, and even many children can be having to look after someone who's chronically ill. And there's also a lot of studies making this association between feeling trapped and depression in students. So that's another big area there that people are feeling like trapped situation. And there's also many other studies, what they call about perceived entrapment, being associated with social anxiety, suicide ideation and suicide behavior.
Commenting off that you can feel trapped as a caregiver, I can imagine that's a really bad situation because you're caring for someone you love usually. So it could be your mother is ill and you need to care for her. You want to do it, but I can imagine the feeling you're trapped. There's so many other things you want to do in life, but you just can't because you need to be there for this person.
It's exactly how you put it there. So it's what we would say is it's an external entrapment. You're in a stressful situation and you're trapped because of your circumstances.
Yeah.
You've basically been forced into that by default. That's not your choice. So it limits your life a lot. And maybe some people make that sacrifice through no decision of their own.
Yeah.
They're basically born into that.
Thinking about it from the perspective of someone who's doing a degree, usually 4 years, somewhere down the line, you maybe realise this degree is not for you and you want to switch. Could that also be you feel kind of trapped that you need to finish the degree because of outside influences? Yeah,
again, that's another thing. If for example, many young people, when they're considering what to study, Are they pushed into these making decisions, do this degree because blah, blah, blah. Your parents think it's a great idea, but you don't particularly like it.
I know a lot of people who have, that's been the case. And then down the line, they went and done another degree because they realise they're actually individuals.
So that's the case of what we would say, again, external entrapment. You feel obliged and you feel, okay, I need to do that because my parents maybe giving me extra funding me or giving me the opportunity to go and study, and you're kind of, or are you actually studying because your parents say you need to go to university?
Yeah,
you need to get
the
degree.
Education.
Even though you think, I don't want to do that. I prefer just to go and get an apprenticeship and go and become like a
different route.
Yeah, become an electrician, a plumber. Not everyone needs to go to university, and maybe that's another stress we have in our society.
Yeah,
this expectations by parents, by friends, by the whole family that everyone should get a degree. And like in some cultures, everyone's like, you need to be a doctor or a dentist or a lawyer.
Specific, yeah. Luckily, you and Mum weren't pushy.
Well, we did suggest. I do remember.
You suggested, but it wasn't you didn't ever push me to do a specific thing. And you suggested, how about a business degree, which is very typical.
Yeah.
Because there's lots of different routes you can go down. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just knew I didn't want to do business. Hindsight, it's 2020, but I could have been interested in that now. I also think people are expected to make this massive decision of where they should go and study at such a young age that it makes no sense to me.
Again, that's another thing, society's expectations. It puts a lot more pressure on young people. So this whole thing about performing, getting a result and being successful, again, it's adding stress.
Social media, I imagine, comparing yourself to other people and your friends. Comparing to
well, you tell me. I mean, you're the young person here.
Yeah, definitely. That is a big part of it. But then I was actually speaking to a friend the other day, and she has still got about a year and a half left of her studies in university, and she really enjoys what she's doing, but she's kind of over it, and she just wants this part of her life to be over, and she wants to start working. Technically, it's not external; it's internal because it's with herself.
Yeah,
she's putting the pressure on herself.
This is how it goes. So wherever the initial idea or motivation comes to do stuff, once you become committed to it, that you realize, okay, I need to finish that. Yeah, you may be feeling trapped inside. So you might have the anxiety, the stress and pressure.
Even though it's a good thing, but
it can be really good.
Yeah.
Well, normally it is a good thing.
Probably in that case, I imagine a bit of stress is good.
Yeah, it shows like you're able to commit to something. You've got the endurance to keep going. But sometimes that type of stress can become unhealthy. So it depends how it impacts you. So, but I think that might be a little bit different stress. But hopefully it's not too much in case. But if it becomes like a situation, remember, I think the Finnish degree situation has been changed because
she's studying abroad.
Ah, okay.
But what's been changed?
Well, if I'm not mistaken, many people in the past would study for many years to do to finish off their master's degree. Like people would leave after their studies, but they haven't finished writing up their master's thesis.
So they're doing it at the same time as they're working, for example.
Yeah, so it's really difficult to finish that. So you to sit down and write that up and stuff like that. Or when people have been doing in the past a long PhD, it's been the same really lengthy process. But now in Finland, they've changed that. So they're making more incentives to finish your stuff earlier.
Could you give us some more examples of what entrapment is?
In World War One, so soldiers were stuck in the trenches and there was a continuous bombing. So these mortars and big shells landing and nearby the soldiers. What can the soldiers do? They just stay in the trench. They can't do anything. You can't shoot a bomb. So they just sit there and they're waiting for the bombs to land. So they're speculating, Jesus, that bomb was close to me. And after a while, you just sit there and you think, okay, how long are you going to be here before something gets you?
Yeah.
And you're dead. So, of course, what they call this, the soldiers living like that, they develop what they call shell shock, surprisingly, or war neurosis it was called, maybe from Germany.
You're just waiting for the next bomb to go off.
Waiting for the next bomb to land nearby you and blow you to pieces, or get hit with shrapnel and you're out of there. So that they call this forced immobilization because you couldn't move. It was no point moving. In the Vietnam War, a lot of studies there which developed this concept of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. When you're in combat, they actually characterize it as like a condition of captivity or enslavement, because during that Vietnam War, it didn't matter which way you ran. If you ran towards the fight at the front line, you could be killed, shot. But if you ran away, you were going to go into prison because you were deserting. And that's the same as in the First World War. A lot of people, they were so shit scared when they deserted from the front line after they'd been like suffering shell shock, tremoring and tics and stuff like that. A lot of the armies would shoot those men because they said they were cowards, but they were overly traumatized. So nowadays we think about the unfortunate situation in Ukraine. Again, you've got this conventional warfare, people in the trenches, just like World War I and even Vietnam. But nowadays you also have drones, not just this. So those people will be suffering in the same way. So to me, that is, you can see that physical manifestation. It's something that you can feel it because it's tangible threat to your life.
Yeah.
Okay, that's something that, but it goes a bit deeper.
So I recall you talking about experiments with trapped dogs. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so around the same time as the Vietnam War, these guys, researchers in the USA, Meyer and Seligman, they were researching what they call learned helplessness in animals. So warning for people who love animal lovers. We're just reporting the research here. That's not us making this up or anything. So what these guys done, they repeatedly gave painful electric shocks to dogs that were trapped in locked cages. And they call this shock treatment inescapable shock because they couldn't escape from it. Kind of like those people in the trenches, they couldn't escape from the train. Okay. So what happened was, after giving several courses of the shock to these dogs which were locked in the cages, they opened the cages and then they shocked the dogs again.
Yeah.
Okay. But to compare, they had a group of control dogs who were never shocked before. As soon as they gave them the shock, the dogs ran away.
Yeah.
So that, okay. But those dogs that were previously given the courses of the shock, whenever they were shocked again, they didn't run away. They just sat there, even though the cages weren't locked.
So they had the opportunity to run away, but they didn't. No,
they just lay there whimpering and literally shitting themselves. They were just defecating in their cages. So what this showed them, the researchers, that the mere opportunity to escape does not make traumatized animals or for that matter, doesn't make traumatized people run for freedom.
Yeah.
So just like the poor dogs, many traumatized people simply give up. There's lots of examples in this whole thing.
Yeah,
I think
big one that comes to mind is abusive relationships.
Yeah, exactly, and I'll come to that in a little bit. But this guy Livingstone, an explorer, and also had religious motives. He went into Africa to try and stop the slave traders, and they met slaves coming through the jungle, and so they helped to free some of them. But what happened is these people had been in chains for months, walking through Africa to go to the coast to be transferred to the Americas.
Yeah.
Even whenever they released these guys who were in chains, many of them just died because they were so
They didn't know what to do.
well.
Survive.
They were just in that situation where they were already given up. Many of the slaves ran away, but some just stayed there like those trapped dogs.
Because you just completely give up.
To completely give up, and they died days later. That's a sad fact. And so it's not just so. Like I say, the opportunity to escape doesn't make traumatized animals or people run for freedom. So many traumatized patients have been exposed to. If we think about people in psychiatry, many of those patients have been exposed to something or somebody who's inflicted terrible harm, and they had no way of escaping.
Yeah.
So they've been trapped or immobilized in some sort of stressful situation.
So the term entrapment, is that more than you're being physically trapped?
No, it's actually more psychological. So even though many of these lab studies with animals show that what they call this restraint stress. So you're basically locked in a cage, you're tired, and when they do lab studies on rats, stuff like that, they actually basically put them on a bench and they can't move, and they insert all sorts of stuff. They inject them with things like this. So that sort of stuff of being immobilized damages your brain neurons. But it also enlarges like the center of your fear response, like the amygdala. So those things show that your brain neurons are some areas like they call dendritic loss. So axons and the different nodes, they don't branch as much or grow. So you lose that. And because the amygdala is enlarged, then what happens is it increases your anxiety behavior. You're hypersensitive and stuff like that. So that happens already when they do those studies in lab animals. But also, when they look at young people or people who have been exposed to early life adversity, like growing up in a poor environment, poor socioeconomic status, people there which have high degrees of perceived entrapment, when they look at their amygdala and measure it, it's enlarged. So that's no physical thing. That's just the perception of being trapped. Does that?
That's interesting.
Okay, so that's people would have that increased anxiety behaviors because of their amygdala enlarged. So that's things that shows that it's psychologically as well. So these lived experience of early life adversity, so even when there's no physical entrapment, such as overwhelming stress of your life, having these dysregulated relations with your parents, this attachment theory when you're wherever it goes.
We learned about it in school.
Yeah. And also other health problems, or these things all have implications for poor mental health. So whenever you're forced to submit to some sort of overwhelming power, like you're being neglected as a child, you've been abused as children, women trapped in domestic violence.
Or men.
Any type of stressful life situation. Whenever people have to live like that under strong influence of another person or another thing, they learn to survive because they have to, and they learn to do that because they just comply. They give up on themselves, so they just do what they have to do to survive. That's the way it is. So it's kind of like your body and your brain accepts the situation you're in.
Yeah,
but it has psychological impacts, and that's physical impacts inside your body. Like I say, your amygdala enlarges, and there's other things. Of course, your stress hormones will raise up, so cortisol, cortisol, lots of stuff will raise, and that has other detrimental effects. And one of the key things about this stuff, so in the physical entrapment, being able to do something or to move to escape a stressful situation is critical factor in determining if a horrible experience like a trauma or a stressful life situation, being able to move or do something to escape has a big impact of whether you're going to be left with mental scars. But also taking control of a situation if you're able to. So a child can't really take control, can they? So that's a big problem. But when you're an adult, learning to take control, that is a big factor again. If you feel that, hey, I've got no way of getting out of this, I'm feeling like I can't see the future, I just can't cope with the situation. It is so stressful, so painful, that many people choose the route of suicide because they feel that suicide offers a way out of the pain and a way out of that feeling of trapped. That's the sad fact. That's where it can lead to.
Yeah.
That's why entrapment is such a big challenge to people who end up feeling that way.
Up until very recently, I'll admit, I didn't understand suicide, how a person can get to that point where you think the only way out is by exiting life on your own terms. I didn't understand it. But then recently, I can understand how a person can feel that way, to feel the need to do that. And I think a lot of people don't understand. Well, I think a big one is that, people say it's a very selfish thing to do. And people don't fully understand what that feeling is behind having to do that.
I'm going to be very controversial here and say that I even believe that some therapists don't understand how bad it is for young people when people go to speak to therapists. Unless they can open up about some key issues, the therapist won't understand where the person is. In actual fact, I've mentioned to some therapists in Finland that this whole thing about entrapment should be adopted and protocols designed in Finland to actually screen for levels of this feeling of feeling trapped, feeling hopeless. It's already in the UK, and that's where most of the studies come from.
Yeah.
But so it actually helps you understand, for a young person or anyone, are they down at that level where they're feeling that badly depressed and feeling in a hopeless, trapped situation?
Yeah.
That the way out may be considering suicide. Whenever I've done those, filled out those forms in Finland when I was being assessed for PTSD, there's lots of forms you fill out, and they talk about your levels of like, do you feel like, high suicidal you feel? There's a lot of stuff you can see there.
Yeah.
That is not covering anywhere near what we're talking about here, entrapment and hopelessness. No, it's not. It's not good enough, in my opinion. So when I say controversial, I think that should be changed immediately in Finland.
Definitely.
That's why I'm saying that the crisis in Finland is the mental health crisis. It's already happening in front of our eyes, young people. Why is it? Why do young people end up in that situation where they feel so bad that they want to consider suicide? Because it's been going on for so long in their life's history, and they're already like young. They're not even 20 years old, and they already have this.
No, there are kids that are like less than 10 years old who commit suicide as well, which is absolutely mad.
It's just bonkers.
Yeah.
It's really sad. So to me, that's the whole thing.
And the parents never know anything, or so they say. But
no, that's it. And of course, many parents are living these lifestyles where they're so busy and stressful lifestyle, trying to bring in the box or whatever. Maybe that's, I don't know. You could criticize that, being too focused on whatever, trying to have a lovely home environment, nice house, nice holidays. I mean, everyone likes to have happiness, but I think there's a lot of these stuff we're not getting the balance right in families, and so there has an impact. And we can't say that.
But it's hard because I think it's so. Yeah, it's such an individual thing. Some people isolate. Some people you can't tell at all.
That's why I'm saying we need to have this system where there's intervene earlier in childhood. Yeah. Just recently, there's a study that they've just been conducting in places like Tampere in several schools, where they bring in these, I think it's volunteers, I think even by the church who are offering it, if I'm not mistaken, for young people especially, like in Lukio. And they're doing that. And that's just been started this year, so in January. And the children, I think already the feedback has been really good. So it gives them easy access. They can go and have a chat. So.
But did you see, was it just offered available for the students, or is it just for young people in general?
Only for people in the schools. So
Yeah.
they're actually going, a few people, volunteers are going into the schools for a Lukio. And I guess this is one of the issues, because these studies are showing that students are reporting like very high mental health problems. So
Yeah.
it's making it available. But again, it
that
shows
is
you.
really good, because I remember when I was in Scotland University, I
Yeah.
can't remember what year it would have been, but I probably would have been around 20. And I had really high anxiety during that time. And I remember I was in a lecture and I got this feeling in my throat that I was going to be sick. And turns out it turned into a panic attack. So I left the lecture, had this panic attack, and obviously I was like crying and stuff. So I ran downstairs near the reception. There's this kind of, I don't know what it's called, but it's like you can go to them for help. I went there and I said to her, obviously I was crying. I was like, hi, is there anyone here that I can talk to? Is there like a school psychologist or anything like that? And she was like, oh, she's only in twice a week for a few hours. And then also trying to book any sort of session with her would have took a month or a few months. And then I was like, oh, really? Kind of like,
You need it now.
I was begging, but I was really pleading for her help. And I could kind of see in her eyes that she felt really sorry for me. But
That's not enough.
she didn't really offer anything. And I know I don't want to put that on her, that she needed to help me, but I don't know. I just think that they should.
But that's the fact. You need it. When you need it, you need it.
Yeah, especially in those environments, schools and universities. I wonder if in lots of workplaces, would they have that sort of service?
Again, it wouldn't be so
You'd have to
immediate.
book it, yeah.
You can get access to your what do they call it, occupational therapist, or
Yeah.
That's most companies, well, larger companies in particular, will have give you
But
access.
it's not
to that.
immediate, is it?
No, it won't. You'll have to book it. I don't think it's immediate. So I think this, I guess, is something worth watching in Tampere, how that
Yeah,
goes.
but it's a really good idea.
It is, but again, it shows this is volunteers. This is not paid by the system. This is
Yeah.
not the system offering this. This is volunteers opening the door to young people who might not otherwise go into a therapist.
Yeah, saying, look,
so
you have the opportunity, even if it's the smallest
bring the
thing.
help into them, giving them easy access, lowering the threshold.
Yeah.
But of course, the system in Finland is all about trying to save costs, trying to avoid people coming into the system. That's the reality. And so these cases of suicide, I'm sad. I have to say, controversially, more can be done to prevent this stuff.
I think
suicides.
definitely encouraging people to talk about it and open up and not feel ashamed to ask for help is a big thing. And you learn that already as a child, that, people are there to listen to you. Well, this is hopefully that, you would want a child to feel that way, so that if it ever came to it, before they make such a drastic decision, like to end your life, that they would already have this.
Yeah, this is why some parents want to have their children around the dinner table and actually eating together, so they can they're having the interaction with their children.
Yeah.
Or they want their children and the adults to be more communicative with one another. So it's difficult. How do you get to know if your child's going to sit in the room and play games or going outside with their friends all the time? You don't know what's going on in their life.
Yeah.
So I think that having that relationship, of course, is so important, isn't it?
Yeah. Lots of factors.
Yeah.
In these situations, how would you gain control? How easy is it to kind of get out of that entrapment mindset?
It's not so easy to change, okay? That's the first thing. So we shouldn't say to people, okay, you can just change. You can just say, oh, don't be depressed. You can't just say that. Or don't feel mentally ill. Just talk to us more.
Yeah.
No, it's not like that. Those people who feel entrapped, they must build their capacity to regain control. So they have to develop coping skills, problem-solving skills, and that takes time and effort, and probably with therapy as well. So if your perceived level of entrapment seems you've gone into that hopeless stage where you just can't see a way out, you really do need help to build your capacity, okay? So hopelessness is really different from entrapment, okay? So entrapment is one thing, but when you go down that slippery slope towards feeling hopeless, you really do need therapy. So hopelessness involves no motivation to escape. You've already given up, and you're being pessimistic about the future. And so hopelessness goes to depression, and depression can go to suicide. But entrapment is whenever you're feeling trapped in the current situation, but you still have that desire to escape.
Right, okay.
Okay, so you see the difference there between feeling entrapped and then going into the hopeless state. So hopelessness is really, that's been discovered in many studies to be a major predictor of depression with lots of evidence with the associations and relationships to suicide ideation and suicide behavior. And in actual fact, what you find in these models on hopelessness, these perceptions of having this levels of inescapability, because you got lack of rescue. You don't see anyone's going to help you.
Yeah.
No one's going to come and get you. And you also have lack of social support. So whatever negative ruminations of your psychological feelings are going on, they just keep going because you don't have the social support to keep your mind in other ways.
Yeah.
So that can generate hopelessness, which in turn can lead to suicide ideation and behavior. So if you think about, like you ask about, does gaining control help? Okay. So they have this thing, a concept called cognitive control, is the person's perception that the challenging situations are still controllable. Now, what I mean by this is like, it's your belief that eventually you can control and make a difference to the stressful situation. So, for example, it enables the person to reappraise the adversity and to manage those negative emotions over any stressors. So this, having a sense of control and a sense of control of the mindset, it really, if you have that, it determines if the response to most stressful experiences is successful or not.
Mm.
So people who often feel trapped, they believe they've got no control over their own circumstances. Okay, so that goes without saying, that's the way it is. And the thing is, when you have repeated failures to cope with these stressors, that amplifies your feeling of lack of control over adverse events. So if you grew up with a childhood where continually it feels like, oh, I'm trapped, but I've got no way of controlling this, you might get into a lifestyle of giving up easy. Or, like we say, some people, they end up being traumatized or having bad relationship in their childhood. They have this tendency to repeat. So they go for relationship and adult life.
And they look for that same thing.
They look for the same thing because it feels comfortable, because doing something else seems so much difficult because they don't have the coping skills. They don't have that stuff. So this lack of cognitive control is really a big major predictor of having psychological problems. So basically, like you say, gaining the sense of control is one of the most effective ways you can alleviate that feeling of entrapment. So because it buffers against feeling hopelessness and depression and stuff like that. So whenever you gain that belief of you're able to overcome your challenges, you're more likely to break that vicious cycle, which happens, you intensify entrapment and it goes into hopelessness and then depression. You can break that if you get a better sense of control. So that is the importance of psychological and psychiatric interventions, helping people build this cognitive control to prevent depression. So
I'd imagine small wins would be important.
Yes.
To gain the control slowly back.
In places like America, people have been traumatized by being mugged. Women being mugged and raped. They've trained them in martial arts just to make them feel better and more in control.
Better self-esteem.
Better self-esteem, feeling, I can do something about it, or at least I can escape the situation. Yeah. So that's what it's all about. Actually, there's that, as we said before, there's that documentary on Netflix called Surfacing, which shows how these military veterans, they have lost arms and legs, and they also have PTSD. They're really depressed. Their life, for them, seems hopeless. So they're trained to surf in the sea. Now you can see that documentary. There's guys with no arms and legs on a surfboard, and they're actually able to go and do surfing. And the feeling that they can do that is an enormous uplift to feeling in control of their lives.
Yeah, definitely.
So that's the thing. So it's like physical things you can do to feel that sense of control, or step by step doing courses, going and boxing training, anything that lifts your self-esteem, makes you feel more in control, more confident. Those like small wins, step by step, is one way of building it. But so you can't just do it you can't just say, I'm not going to feel depressed anymore. I'm going to go and do X, Y, and Z. No, it's something you have to build. But I think it's one of those things.
But
once you get on that path,
in a sense, some people might have the ability to one day something just clicks in them, and that's when they decide to start trying for these small wins. Like the change doesn't happen suddenly, but maybe the change in mindset that, okay, this is where I start trying again.
I agree totally. I think
quickly.
we've all been there. I mean, something happens in your life and it does it force you to reflect and change and think, okay, maybe you got to a low point and you decide, okay, I'm gonna show them. Anything that motivates you to get back on that road of like sticking up for yourself and going and trying to take back control of certain things. I wouldn't advise people to try and be in control of everything because that's not possible. It's only going to add more stress to you.
Control freak.
Yeah. So to me, but still.
But I have that every night for some reason. Just before I'm about to go to bed, I think, okay, now I'm going to change my life around, wake up really early, exercise, eat healthy. And then the morning comes around and then you kind of feel defeated again.
It's difficult.
But then this is a lot in a lot smaller, obviously, mindset. I'm not entrapped or anything like that. But
well, you just give a good explanation of why we should always only go for the small steps and the small wins.
Yeah.
Just start off one step at a time and one goal at a time. Don't try and do everything.
Yeah.
It's like when people get onto a really strict diet, it won't work because it's not sustainable.
Last, yeah.
Just go for healthier lifestyle, healthy.
But even the small things as well can feel completely overwhelming sometimes. So I really do feel for people who are in that situation.
It's not easy.
And I wish everyone would understand.
Yeah, and so those people who don't maybe grew up in a lifestyle or a situation, circumstances which enable them to go through life without
they've not experienced it themselves, so
without much adversity, and they point the finger and they look at other people and say, "Oh yeah, you're hopeless and all this. You're a failure and you're this, that, and the other." It's not very nice of them to be feeling that way and smug because they've never experienced that level of adversity. So to me, we have to cut people who are suffering in these situations with some slack. We have to give them, we don't know their background and their life history. So let's not be pointing the finger and say that, oh, your lifestyle is the reason why you've got that.
Still to kind of touch on the suicide topic, especially in Finland.
Yeah, okay.
What's the situation? Or did you have some points on, what was it, suicidality?
Yes, suicidality or suicidal behavior. Yeah, I can talk about that. But so there's this concept that they call deaths of despair. And in Finland, these rates of death of despair related to suicide, drug and alcohol abuse are much higher, and they remain much higher than in Finland than an EU average. So depression is more prevalent in people who've got lower income groups, and particularly among young women. So this is like a state of health in the EU report on Finland 2023. So that's similar to other countries, okay? But things like male suicide have increased since the 1970s till 1990, where they peaked something like from around 1,200 people per year committed suicide in Finland in 1990. And that has since halved to about 600 people per year committing suicide. It's still higher than many other countries in the EU. But female suicides have remained really relatively low, like about 200 people committing suicide, sadly, since the 70s.
So it's higher in males?
Much higher in males. And it's
in
still
Finland?
In Finland, yeah. But the other thing is that the number of suicides and deaths related to alcohol amongst young men remains a major concern in Finland. So
what does that mean? They're alcoholics who commit suicide?
Generally speaking...
or they drink themselves to death?
Well, again, it goes back to that lifestyle. If you're, like we talked about, when you're stressed out and feeling like in that situation, whether it's trapped or feeling hopeless, do you end up self-medicating, drinking more? So it's connected to that. So, of course, many people who are committing suicide, they've been drinking alcohol.
Right, okay.
So that gets them down that slippery slope.
Yeah.
So this whole issue of suicides and perceptions of entrapment and hopelessness really illustrates why professionals, I'm talking about psychiatrists, GPs, general practitioners and psychologists, they really need to have more understanding of life histories so that they can screen for levels of feeling of being trapped, feeling hopeless. I'll talk now about this Hannah Giro's dissertation. I think it was from the University of Turku. And she was asking the question, does Finnish culture nurture suicide? So her dissertation is about these tragic stories of the lives of young people ended through suicide. And she analysed case studies of like I can't remember, it was 15 or 20 people.
What year was this she done this study?
I think it was 2015, so about almost 10 years ago it was published. So these people were aged between 15 and 30, 31 years old. And what she concludes is that most of the young people, they actually sought death because they believed that death offered a way out of what seemed like an endless state of hopelessness. So that goes back to our entrapment stuff.
Yeah.
Now, the way she analysed it, she went through done a lot of interviews, case studies with the parents. And so these parents, in their narratives, they criticised the assistance work of the service system. So how it went. The mental symptoms of the young people were encountered but treated medically. What I mean by that is the potential therapy work remains subordinate. So drugs first, okay, and then see what happens. But okay. So in those professional encounters in the early stages, those distraught young people, they pretended to be lost behind a diagnosis of depression. So that's typical. You go, okay, you're depressed, so here's the medication. So the result was the seriousness of each one of those young person's situation was just misunderstood. So this goes back to what I'm saying, that
shame.
The medical professions are not realizing that these people are feeling trapped inside. They're feeling in a hopeless situation. That was just not picked up, okay? So Hannah highlights other factors. So she says the cultural sphere of Finnish suicide, and so I interpret this when I read through and understand what she's saying. So it's basically saying that the chronic stress generated by societal expectations in Finland is kind of like contributing to feelings of suicide or wanting to suicide. So when she looks at other facts, she says the suicide rate in Finland is exceptionally high in young men, for sure, and that's still the case. As suicides are linked to the violent tendencies of men, something she argues. And she also points out that school massacres and family murders are common in this group. So again, young men. And of course, if you look at all those massacres in Finnish schools, most of them are committed by young men, but there was one shooting, I think, with one young woman. But in every case, bullying in that person's, the one who committed those massacres, bullying was a common factor in those shootings.
I have to say, I've seen lots of people blame the teachers. Oh, the teachers don't intervene, they don't do anything.
They should have noticed, they should have X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, but I've worked in a school, and I can't speak for every single school or every single teacher, but I would argue that teachers do a lot these days to intervene and to watch out for situations, even situations that aren't being spoken about. You have to do your best to kind of analyse situations. But it's also the parents at home and how they are with that child.
Yes, this is the problem. So I think there's a lot of the burdens in society being pushed onto schools, and I think we've seen this in the UK.
Yeah, it's always the school's
They're
fault.
always blaming the schools, and school teachers should have spotted this.
Yeah.
But
how about the parents?
Yeah, how about the parents? Exactly. So that's that goes back to the lifestyles that we have nowadays. Everyone, we can't point the finger in one direction. To me, it's a multiple thing that needs to be addressed in society.
And I'd say especially if the parents don't notice that their kid is being bullied, perhaps I understand that. But in the case of a bully, from personal experience, the teachers do intervene and they speak with the parents, have meetings with the parents. But then it's that parent's job when they get home. The kids are going to respect the parents more than they respect teachers. I think especially these days, there's not really much respect for teachers.
Yeah. Where does the bully learn that behaviour from?
Yeah. And then if how many times a teacher can only do so much to tell that parent and tell that child, it's problematic behaviour. But then the parent probably goes, okay, yeah, I'll talk to them when I get home. And then if nothing happens because the parent doesn't care.
Yeah, but why is the child learning the bullying behaviour? Where does he learn it from?
To begin with, yeah.
So that's the big question there. That's the elephant in the room, first of all. Okay. So to me, it's a vicious cycle, and it's a problem we have in society. So to me, I think that's a big issue. And of course, there's many underlying factors. But to me, again, it goes to the root cause that there are underlying mental health issues in the perpetrators here.
Yeah, definitely.
And that sort of stuff.
Absolutely.
So we have to think that when it comes to people committing suicide, they're not going and attacking other people. So they take it out on themselves. So that's the main thing here we should focus on.
However,
yeah,
I'm very into my true crime. The one thing I find really fascinating, got kind of a morbid curiosity about it, is these family annihilators who kill their whole family and then they themselves commit suicide. Why are you not, this is horrible to say, why not just commit suicide? Why do you have to kill your children, your wife?
Yeah,
and
that's horrible, but I don't understand that in a rational way. I can understand it from their perspective that they feel, okay, I'm going to die, my life's shit, so I'm going to make sure that all these other people.
Because I've seen the psychology behind it. Usually
Really?
is men that are those family annihilators. And a big part of it is this entrapment, that they feel trapped either financially, they feel trapped because they've met a new person, and the only thing that they see fit is to remove the family out of that equation.
You're saying they've met a new person, or the wife has met a new person?
They've met a new person. They've met a new spouse.
Wow. Okay, but so the entrapment bit, feeling trapped in a situation, and
that
so
there's no other way out.
They see their life is ruined.
Yeah.
In their perception.
Yeah.
So they're going to kill themselves, and then they go and kill all their immediate family.
Yeah, but then that's the part I don't really understand how that would. But then again, obviously, I don't know if there isn't really a logic behind it, is there? Not
a rational logic. There'll be a logic there in their minds, but not a rational one. I think it's more about, okay, I suppose, my life is over, so I'm going to make sure their life is over. But I don't see you taking out the kids either, do you? I mean,
well, sometimes it is just they don't actually commit suicide themselves. They just kill the family because they have this entrapment. Yeah,
well, I think that's going to the extreme there. I want to talk about entrapment, but it's another example of how the psychology can affect people's minds. In Giru's dissertation, she says that these cultural expectations can lead to feelings of failure and shame, which trigger this self-destructive behavior. And she elaborates further and said, especially in Finland, success is idealized, the ability to cope alone is emphasized in Finnish society and culture, and failure is considered shameful. So men aren't allowed to cry; they got to bottle everything up. And so she concludes, it could even be asked whether Finnish culture nurtures suicide.
Yeah.
What do you think? I mean,
it's very drastic to just say yes.
Yeah, obviously there's more to it, but
I think
that's the question, isn't it?
As we briefly touched in our last episode, Finnish teenagers / young adults move away from home basically as soon as they can. Lots of people, I think, in Finland live alone. It's not part of the culture to really have like flatmates, I wouldn't say. Or as much so as I experienced in the UK, lots of people live with their friends. In here, lots of people live alone. You live in such a small space, a box, and you isolate yourself. If you're going through something, especially men, they're not taught to, talk about their feelings with.
Yeah. It's a macho like system, so people aren't going to be opened up. Okay, maybe younger people are learning better to do that, and I think that's a good move. Well,
hopefully, but I do think it's still
big issue.
Yeah, among men, and I'd say
and women.
Well, yeah, in Finland, I'd say for sure people look at you as if what are you doing? You shouldn't be talking about that. Like, shh.
I know.
Can't say anything like.
That's it. It rings a bell with me. I can relate to it. That.
Yeah, I'd say there's a culmination of lots of things. The dark winters, no sunlight, definitely has an effect. Isolation.
By default, the isolation comes early in life, yeah?
Yeah, not being able to speak about these topics.
But what about the whole issue about this social exclusion, like we mentioned earlier, this northern...
With the young people?
Yeah.
Nuorten syrjäytyminen, so youth isolation, I suppose, would you call it?
Yeah, or social exclusion of... young people in particular,
I think is very big in Finland.
Weren't they just talking about that the other night in our studio, weren't they?
You watched that, but I didn't watch that.
Yeah, I thought they were talking mostly about economic crises and also talking about other challenges for the Finnish economy going ahead. Very insightful to him to bring that up in this time when we're talking about a situation where there's more cutbacks. What's going to happen? What's the opportunities for young people? As we've been talking here, we can see that the life circumstances, particularly when people feel isolated, they're feeling excluded from society for many reasons. And we can see that that's connected with mental health. And this feeling of mental health, if you're feeling trapped by the situation, for example, you've got less possibilities to get work. You've got lower possibilities to get into good education. You're feeling trapped in a situation you maybe can't get out of. Is there going to be more young people becoming and feeling trapped and feeling more hopeless? And now we got this welfare areas, more pressure on those. So there's less services, there's less, the levels of education and healthcare is going to drop. And also access to mental health care.
Yeah, well, I'd say definitely young people who are unemployed. Well, anyone who's unemployed, I think, is a big part of feeling isolated, because everyone, I don't know if there's unemployed people who also have lots of unemployed friends, but usually most of the people around you have jobs or they're studying or something, and then you yourself are unemployed. You feel like a piece of crap, basically. You don't have a community, or you feel like you don't have a community, so you feel isolated in that sense. And then you also feel like people are judging you, your friends, your family, people that don't know you are judging you, so you have really low self-esteem.
Well, that's what Hannah Giro's saying in her dissertation. That's it. So,
and I suppose that has to do with Finnish culture as well, because there are these expectations of a person to, you know, have a job, be educated, be successful and stuff like that.
Not to be a loser, not to be a failure and stuff like that. Yeah.
And then
of
if you do feel like
just,
a loser, then you're going to isolate yourself and drink or eat really bad foods, not exercise.
Yes.
So it is, like you said, it's like a cycle.
Vicious cycle.
Yeah.
Spiral that we have to be careful with.
Yeah.
So.
But then I also saw that they were saying, obviously, I suppose this is obvious fact, but that it's really bad for the Finnish economy as well. And it's not just an individual's problem who's feeling isolated.
How much do they estimate? Something like if you don't
if a person
contribute?
is feeling this way, you know, isolated, left out, feeling bad about yourself, that throughout that one person's life, it costs 1.2 million for the Finnish economy. And that's just one person throughout their life.
Because of the extra burden on healthcare costs, mental health, not
medication
contributing to medication, but also missing out and not contributing with
unemployment benefits and stuff like that.
So there's another reason why we should have more psychological or psychiatric interventions in mental health.
Why lots of politicians don't think it's an important thing, because it's a financial thing as well.
They're not thinking of long term, and that's the whole situation with this chronic crisis and chronic stress in Finland. Need to intervene earlier to save a lot of this burden for the future. Otherwise, you're just going to be adding more problems, mental health, adding more problems, creating more risk, opening up for these chronic diseases. So we talk about things like Alzheimer's getting worse. Like, what did they say? Like by 2040, there will be something 45. Like almost 250,000 people will have Alzheimer's. That's what they estimate. Yeah. We, as a society and the medical profession and the psychiatric profession, I would argue, are not recognizing these symptoms as something that's is already warning us about the future. So we're not watching, and that's the whole point of my research. There are many indicators, left, right, and center, showing this situation in mental health amongst young people. And if you look at those diseases developing, you can see the connection in the studies from other parts of the world, which clearly demonstrate this evidence. There is a strong links between a state of mental health in people which develops into chronic diseases in the future. That's why I want to do more studies in Finland, well, a proper study in Finland. Am I going to be able to do that? No, because the profession here don't seem to want to agree that. Or they will do
after they listen to this episode, that's for sure.
I hope so. For the sake of
another
young
big
people.
question I often think about is this modern age of social media. Is social media making people in general, more so I'd say young people, is it making them more isolated, or is social media giving them a community? It's a very layered question, and there's so much to it. I think in general, social media does help connect and see other people's lives. However, I don't think it's that natural to be exposed to so many different people.
I can see benefits if someone's feeling really isolated and they have physical problems about getting outdoors, such as people maybe they have different challenges with their physical situation or their mental situation. Maybe some people gain from having a network of people that at least they can communicate.
Maybe other people in similar situations.
But I think for people who can get out and about and move about, if they're isolating themselves at home because they feel bad because of the mental health situation, I mean, is the observing what's going on with other people's saying, oh, here's what I'm eating here, I'm going here for holiday, I'm doing this, I'm doing that.
Comparing yourself, and because social media is often very curated. I think for that point, if someone would, for example, have an eating disorder and they are they feel quite isolated in that.
Mm-hmm.
But then they go online looking for a community of people who are also going through the same thing.
Yeah.
Then they find that it can obviously make the eating disorder worse because they just encourage each other,
They
give each
feel
other
more
tips
secure.
and stuff.
Okay.
But then like internally, that person probably feels quite nice that, oh, there are other people. I'm not alone in this. And you feel good, even though it's not actually good for you. Also, I think another thing we talked about would be great if anyone has or wants to, is willing to share their experience with therapy in Finland. And we could discuss that then on here.
I think
just drop us a message.
There's a lot of areas there I think we could go on, but I think we'd like to hear people's feedback, especially people giving points of view, questions about therapy, their feelings about mental health and how the system is, how they feel. Is it working for them? Are they having problems accessing it? What they feel is good coping strategies and stuff like that. Of course, that'd be good to share as well. But yeah, feedback is so important. And I think hearing people's experiences. And we're not just talking about expats or foreigners. We're talking about Finnish people.
Yeah,
we want to hear.
we're speaking English because we don't speak Finnish. Well, I speak Finnish.
You speak Finnish and my Finnish is abominable.
But yeah, I wish we could speak Finnish because then a lot more people would understand. But yeah, if there are Finnish people listening to this, then
please,
even if you want to write in Finnish, I'll understand it.
Yeah, that's important. So if Finnish people write in Finnish,
yeah, definitely,
don't have to do it in English.
Yeah, but yeah, thank you very much. We'll be back for episode 3.
I think in that episode we talk more about childhood experiences. So there's adverse childhood experiences, these ACE studies. There's so much we can talk about there, and I think that has a big impact.
It's an interesting one for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you very much for listening, and see you soon.
Yeah. Thank you from me. So bye.